We're going to talk about how to solve a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is here. It's kind of a mess. It revolves around the values of a, b, and c from your quadratic equation. So for example, this equation over here to the right it's already all on one side and 0 on the other side. That's the first thing you need to do, is make it be like that. And then you identify your a, which is on your x squared, which here is 4, your b, which is with your x, and here the b value is -8, and your c, which is your constant, which here is the number 4. Then you plug those numbers into this formula, which is x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and then all of that is divided by 2a. I'm going to be showing you how to do this in 2 parts using Desmos. The first part we're going to do is finding the discriminant. The discriminant is the part of this formula that is inside of the square root. That is this part. And one thing that you want to know is if you have a positive discriminant, then you would have 2 answers, because when you take the square root of a positive number, you do get a value. And since you have this plus and minus, what that means is you have 2 answers. You have one answer where you work the formula using the plus sign, and one where you work it using the minus sign. So if the number inside of the root is a positive value, you'll get 2 answers. If the number inside of the square root is a 0, then you get 0. And if you add or subtract the value 0, it won't change anything. So if the discriminant is actually the number 0, there will only be one answer. And if the discriminant is a negative value, you won't be able to take the square root of a negative number, and so you would say there was no real solutions. So we're going to look at one example of each type here, starting with this one. So we have our a and our b and our c, and I'm going to fill in the formula, which is -b, which is -8. So it's going to be like minus and minus, which is going to make that a +8, plus or minus the square root, -8 squared minus 4 times a times c. And then all of this is going to be divided by 2 times a. And we're going to use Desmos to help us simplify this down. So I'm going to move this over and get Desmos ready for us here. So I'm going to do this in 2 parts. Like I said, I'm going to have the discriminant portion first. And once you set this up, these parentheses and things, you'll be able to just edit the numbers for the next problem. So I'm just typing it just like it looks. Whoops. There we go. So I've got the discriminant part, which is the part in the root, and I got the number -72, but something, oh, I forgot the squared here. There we go. So, and I got 0. So what this means is that over here, we're really looking at -8, that's +8, plus or minus the square root of 0 divided by 8. Well, the square root of 0 is just 0. So this is like saying 8 plus 0 over 8 and 8 minus 0 over 8. And so that's just going to be 8 over 8, which is 1. This would give you 1. You get one answer. The answer is the number 1. So x equals 1. And that's our only solution. We have one real solution, and it is the number 1. Now, if you didn't get 0, you would need to do more math in Desmos, which we're going to do on the next problem. So we're going to be looking at this one here on the left. The first step is to bring everything to the same side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this x value that is on the right side. It's a positive x, so I'm going to move it by subtracting x from both sides. That's going to be my middle term. So I'm going to have 3x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0, giving me an a value of 3, a b value of -1, and a c value of -1. Going to plug that into the formula. So we've got x equals -b, which is -1, which is going to be a +1, plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac. Be sure that the b value is in parentheses because you want to square the negative sign as well as the number 1. If you don't use parentheses there, it's not going to do that properly. All over 2 times a. So we're going to go over here to Desmos. And like I said, we're just going to edit these parentheses. So the discriminant is negative 1 squared. And then times 3 here. And then this one is negative 1. And it gives me the value 13. So negative 1 is going to be a positive 1 plus or minus the square root of 13 divided by 6, because 2 times 3 is 6. So our two answers, one of them is 1 plus the square root of 13 over 6. And the other is 1 minus the square root of 13 over 6. And we're going to go ahead and get a decimal value for these in Desmos. So I'm going to leave that first line of Desmos because I'm going to reuse that. And I'm going to start a fraction. To begin with a fraction, just hit the divide. Now you have a numerator and a denominator. We're going to put 1 plus the square root of 13, and there is a square root button here in Desmos. And then the denominator is going to be the number 6. And so this gives us a decimal value. So we're going to say about 0.77 for that one. So here we have 0.77 for the first answer. Then we're going to go back to Desmos. We're going to make this a minus sign. Negative 0.43. And so this one has 2 solutions because the discriminant was a positive value, which leads to having 2 real solutions. And then the last one here. So we're going to, again, bring everything to the same side. We're going to move this negative 2 by adding 2 to both sides. Going to give us 3x squared minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. This means that our a is 3, our b is negative 3, and our c is 2. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to go to Desmos for our discriminant. So I'm going to edit this top math here. We've got negative 3 in the first parentheses. Then we've got 3 and then a 2. So just editing that, and I'm getting negative 15. So negative 3 would make a positive 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 15 divided by 6. And you cannot do a negative root. So like if I would change this to be negative 15, should give me an error. There we go. It is. It's giving me an undefined. And we can even make this the 3 like we had. So now it's showing the minus sign, but it's showing this equation, and it's showing me that it's undefined. And even if I make it positive, it's still undefined. And so there's no real solutions with this one because the discriminant is a negative value. So what we're going to write for this one is no real solutions.